Greetings, everyone. Welcome to episode 48. We are almost to 50. 48 of Teaching Tales, the podcast totally devoted to sharing stories from the world of education. Once again, I am Brent Coley, your host, elementary principal in Southern California. And joining me tonight, as we're recording in the evening, I'm on the West Coast. Brian is on the East Coast. Joining me is Brian Costello. Brian, how are you tonight?
I am doing great, and thanks so much for inviting me to come on tonight.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to this chat. This is the first time we've ever spoken virtually, never met in person, but on Twitter, I've had some conversations. And for anyone who is not familiar with you and your work, give listeners, give my mom and dad, because I know at least they're listening. Who is Brian Costello? What does Brian Costello do?
So I am a digital innovation specialist, which is a really, really fancy way of saying that I work on integrating technology and digital tools into lessons and curriculum, but I get to work with kids. So I'm kind of like a tech coach whose main focus is to work with kids, but then I also work with teachers. So that's been my job for the last 2 years. Before that, I worked as a kindergarten, first and second grade teacher, different years, different ages, but moved around a lot at a really small school out here in southern New Jersey. So like I said, on the East Coast, I've been teaching for, when you stop remembering how many years it is, it's kind of like when you have to stop and think about it, it's like 11 years, plus a handful of years as an aide and and when I went back and got my teaching degree. I've written a couple of children's books, chapter books, Will McGill series, and just finished putting out a book called The Teacher's Journey. I host a podcast by the same name, and my parents are also the listeners to that. So, I think we have that in common. We have a handful of listeners, and they include our parents for sure.
That's right.
And yeah, I love teaching. I love playing with technology and bringing it to kids and showing them what they can do. I used to work with young kids. Now I work with middle schoolers. I find them to be very much the same in a lot of ways. And yeah, I love to share. I love to help people. And that's kind of how I ended up where I am at this point.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm excited because you mentioned your book, The Teacher's Journey, which in just kind of reading the little synopsis of it is you're sharing stories of the teacher's journey, which hence the name. And that's kind of the story that when we talked about, well, what kind of stories would you like to share on Teaching Tales? You said, how about I share my story of kind of how I got into teaching and then how I almost got out of teaching just as quickly. And that is a very intriguing story. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I went to college and I'm amazed. So I talked to a lot of teachers, and one of the things I note in the book is about how there's a lot of people who knew they wanted to be a teacher from the moment from the time they were little, they know the whole time. They just knew they were going to be a teacher. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I was 18. I went to college with the idea that I was going to go play soccer and learn stuff. And I don't regret that at all. But I also didn't even go to a school that had an education program. So I got out of school when I became a financial advisor, which I hated. My fiance at the time says, "You like kids? Why don't you go be a substitute? Try it out." So I went back to where I went to elementary school, and I talked to the superintendent there. And he set me up with a permanent sub, like a building sub job where I'd be in the building every day. Mm-hmm. The first day of school, I go into the building and nobody's absent. So it's not like I need to cover any classes. And they're like, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to stand in the hallway and you're going to tell kids where to go. I've only been in this building for about 8 seconds, so I don't even know where the kids are supposed to go. And then the kids are crying. The first grade kids are crying. They don't know what's going on. They're like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I'm like, go that way. Just pointing. Go down that way. You'll find the teacher. They'll help you out. And then I unpacked books and delivered them to the classrooms. And I remember leaving there on that day. And you would think directing traffic and unpacking books and dropping them off in classrooms would be the worst day ever. And I could not possibly imagine wanting to go be and do anything else with my life. I'm like, I am going to be a teacher. This is where I've got to be. what do I have to do to make it happen? I had an awesome principal who put me in a lot of good positions to learn and help me figure out how I could get myself on the path to getting there. I didn't get a job in that district. I ended up getting a job in another district, which I think was best for me because it gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of develop myself and who I am. But in that first year, I almost ended up not being a teacher after that first year. So it was really, really wild, and so to speak. So I got hired to teach kindergarten, and most of my classroom experience was with second grade. So the only classroom time I'd spent in kindergarten was as a one-on-one aide for a kid that basically was only in the school district long enough for us to document why he shouldn't be in the school district. That's pretty much what my job was to make sure he didn't hurt anybody, make sure he didn't hurt himself, and make sure he didn't get lost, and document all the things that happened so that they could, get him to the appropriate place for him that would help him the most. And that was my job for like the first 4 weeks that I worked, like they actually had a permanent like setting. That was the only time I'd spent in kindergarten. So I went into kindergarten and I was like, oh man, I'm going to be the best thing that's ever happened to these kids. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to be amazing. I've spent 3 years learning how to teach in classrooms. Like I have so much more experience than the average person who comes out of a teaching program because I've spent all this time in classrooms learning. I walked in there and I closed the door and I'm like, as soon as I closed the door, like some people feel like, awesome, this is amazing. I feel so relieved. And I felt terrified because I realized at that moment I had absolutely no idea what I was really doing and I couldn't let anybody know. And I think that's one of the things that is really difficult as new teachers is we shut ourselves in the room. We shut ourselves in the classroom. And we don't tell people when we need help because we're afraid they're going to think that we don't know what we're doing, or we didn't deserve the job, or we don't know, we don't belong there, or, the parents are going to find out, or God forbid the kids are going to find out. Right. Like, so, we don't mention that we don't know what we're doing and we just try to figure it out. So I spent a lot of that year trying to figure it out. And when you get to school, you're assigned a mentor, right? And typically schools, for the most part, they assign mentors, and the mentors they assign are just like your grade level partner, or, a veteran teacher who happens to work near you. And so I was assigned this woman, and I did not teach the way she taught. Like, that wasn't going to fit for me. Like, we weren't going to mesh as teachers. Like we just didn't have the same styles, the same personality. She was a wonderful person, very kind. She would talk to me about her family. We talked a lot about things, but about teaching in the classroom, not a lot. Like we didn't talk a lot about that. She gave me her resources. She gave me her stuff. She gave me the rundown of like, here's a few things you need to know how to do. Like, here's how you turn in lesson plans. Here's how you, here's the things you need to know when you're signing in. Here's how you order lunch if you want it, like that kind of stuff that you do need to know, but is inconsequential in terms of really making a difference in a classroom. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure things out on my own. But like I said before, I had this delusion that I was going to be amazing right away. And, I kind of held that in my head even when I realized that I wasn't. And so I remember there was a moment where like my kids used to come in their kindergartens, they'd have a snack and they'd bring snacks in, and I'd had snacks there for them also because a lot of kids didn't have snacks. And it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. 5-year-old girl takes out a king-size candy bar. She's like, this is my snack. And I said, nope, you can bring that to lunch. You're not going to have that right now. That's not going to happen. And she had a total meltdown, started crying. I'm like, I'll give you your snack. I have a couple different choices. You can try it, whatever. Total meltdown. Me being a new teacher, me having like several kids in the classroom who were prone to having meltdowns, especially when others were having meltdowns. I just was like, all right, you're going to go take a walk, go down with the aide, calm down, go down to the office and take this with you. And by the time you finished it, you can come back. She goes down to the office. She comes back a few minutes later, calm down, sits down at her desk, takes out her candy bar and starts eating it. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, well, it's my snack. I'm like, and she was like, and they said I could have it. I'm like, well, no, I just said that you could have that at lunch. And they're right back into the whole thing. So I sent her back down with the aide again. And apparently there was a miscommunication between myself and the administrator who was working with her. And she had basically said that she could have that. And I had said that she couldn't. And I guess there was some sort of miscommunication, which I then challenged the administrator on, during the next open period. I said, well, why would you tell her she could have that? I told her she couldn't. That doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do something like that, basically? And she didn't take that very well. It wasn't, being questioned and, pushed back on by a new teacher is not something that every administrator takes too well. So, about an hour and a half later in my mailbox. So at New Jersey, when you're new, you get you have to have a regular evaluations. You also get the state evaluations to get your permanent license instead of your provisional license. So, I got one of those evaluations filled back, and it was pretty rough. It wasn't good. And a lot of it was about poor communication skills and that kind of stuff. Basically, it reflected what had just happened. To me, it was really obvious that it was filled out almost immediately after that fact, that it just was filled out right after that happened. And I thought to myself, this is absurd. How could this is an injustice. I have been done wrong. This cannot stand. I was I was beside myself and thinking, how could I allow this to stand? This is insane. This isn't okay with me. I'm being wronged here. Someone is putting on my permanent records something that isn't correct. Mm-hmm. Now, were there reasons for some of those things that may not have had anything to do with what just happened? Probably. I mean, there could have definitely been things. Like I said, I wasn't as great as I had hoped I would be. And I don't think most new teachers are. Mm-hmm. But in my mind at that moment, all I could see was the injustice that was just done to me because we had a disagreement, right? I just disagreed with her and not even behind completely closed doors, where people probably had heard it. I mean, we're sitting in the middle of the office or the hallway or the lunchroom or anything, but it wasn't the door wasn't closed. And so I'm thinking to myself, I have to fight this, right? I can't let this stand. This isn't okay. But I didn't know what to do, right? As a new teacher, what recourse did I really have? So, I went home and I talked to my parents who were both in education. I talked to my wife and I talked to my family. I'm like, what do I do? And my mom was like, well, who's your mentor teacher? And so I talked about how, she was a good person and we were friendly, but we didn't really see eye to eye. We didn't really talk a lot about school stuff. Yeah. She's like, well, go talk to her. She's like, first she said, do you trust her? And I said, yeah, I think so. I think I trust her pretty well. I don't think that she would turn around and tell everything that I just said to her, to everybody else. So I went in and I talked to her and I said, look, what do I do? In your experience in working with this administrator, what do I do? And she looked at me and she said, she loves you. She really likes you. You are one of her favorites right now. She might not like you right now, but but she really likes you. And she's going, she'll get over this if you let it go. She said, so whatever is bothering you right now, she's like, your best bet is going to be to swallow that, go in there, smile. She says, she had to go in with me for the thing. She says, I'll go in with you. If you want to fight about it, I'll support you. But look, your best bet is to go in there, smile, sign the paper, say, I'll do better, and walk out there and move on. Mm-hmm. And she said 2 or 3 weeks from now, she'll forget all about this as long as you let it go. And so I took that advice and I did that. And I'd say about 3 months later, when in New Jersey, right as Chris Christie was elected, so it's been 9 years ago now, and he put forth a budget for education that cut out $1 billion in funding for the state. So districts all over the state were cutting teachers, were raising district taxes and cutting teachers left and right just to make ends meet. And our district was small, and we were at risk of potentially losing 5 or 6 teachers out of the 25 or so of us. And I would have been number one. Right. So that's when it really hit me how important it was that if I was cut as a first year teacher, the chances of me getting another job when there are so many other teachers with experience out there who were also looking for jobs at that time would have been so hard. And I spent so long just trying to get to that point that I really thought hard about, am I even going to be a teacher next year? Like, if I lose my job this year, am I even going to get to be a teacher next year? And the realistic answer was probably not. Like, I was going to have to look at other jobs too. And I went to all the board meetings to hear what all the people were saying. And this administrator, she was the superintendent and a principal, because that's this really small school district. It happens sometimes in New Jersey. And so she would stand there in board meeting after board meeting, stand up in front of the people in this community and talk about why it was important for us to save the positions and the teaching jobs that we had. And she stood up in front of some guy who literally stopped at the school one day to count the number of cars in the parking lot and then go to the board meeting and complain about how many cars were there. And I was like, she put up with hours over the course of maybe 5 or 6 meetings of people ranting about the school wasting money and we don't need all the teachers we have. And when I went to school, there were 80 kids in a class and we just sat there and did what we were supposed to do. And like, the things that people will throw at you from, 1945. And you think to yourself, I'm going to lose my job because all these people are out for her head. And there she was, standing there calmly, intelligently defending the position that I had to keep fighting for my job. And I think back to that moment 2 or 3 months earlier, that if I had fought with her, if I had tried to make an issue of this one thing that really didn't end up being that big of a deal, how hard would she have really fought for that one person, that one position? Maybe she would have, but I could have very easily been out of the school district where I was. I could have been out of education just like that. And all the things that I had done come back to having a great career-saving experience with a mentor, where it wasn't about like her giving me her lesson plans or making me extra copies of her stuff or even showing me how to do something. It was her experience in that building with that person, knowing who she was, knowing how she handled things, knowing what was going to happen. Kind of knowing in advance what would be the case, if she knew, she's like, look, if you just let it go, she will be happy and she'll be happy to, support you in a week or so. She'll forget all about this. And if you don't, it will come back to haunt you. And when she said that, I wasn't really sure, but I just, I'm going to trust her on this one. And I did what she said. And as a young kid who was a little headstrong and kind of, like I said, thought a lot more probably of myself than I really maybe deserved as a teacher at the time. I had to swallow that pride and really learn that wasn't a battle worth fighting. And because I was able to do that, and because I got that great advice, everything else that has happened since then in my career has happened because I didn't fall out of education from the beginning.
Awesome. And because, I mean, as you're telling the story, I'm thinking back to, excuse me, to my first year of teaching and the person that I was paired with. So Masako Kawase was her name. She's now retired, but she was a godsend. She was a godsend. And as you were talking about that, like your mentor, educationally, you weren't necessarily on the same page. She had a different teaching style, but you said just from that, you were able to talk to her. You were able to bounce ideas off of her. In this case of the evaluation you got, and what do you think I should do? She was able to give you some sound advice. I mean, I'm thinking here. I wrote down the word encouragement, and I wrote down the phrase "shoulder to cry on," because I think as part of a mentor relationship, oftentimes as a first year teacher, yes, the lesson plans and the resources, that's important. But so often, I mean, wouldn't you agree, Brian, that you just need somebody to tell you you're doing okay? Or when you bomb that lesson, tomorrow's another day. Or how can, I mean, I just think that because teaching is hard, it is a hard job. And I think, yes, a mentor's job is to help guide somebody in terms of the practice, but I think equally as important is the affective side of that, the socio-emotional side of that. Would you agree?
Yeah, one of the things that I write a bit about, and it's something that I pull actually from outside of education when I looked at mentoring, and honestly, when I used to think about my mentor before I really thought deeply about mentoring, I thought she was not a mentor. Like, that's basically how I felt about her for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have been more wrong about that, because what really, all those things, the lesson plans, the even the quality instruction, those are coaching aspects, right? Like, those are skills you are developing. That's something that a coach does. Coach will develop your skills. So for that purpose, you need that person as a coach, or you need some person as a coach, but you also need people who you can trust, who, yes, will help you move past things when they go wrong, who are there to share your triumphs with as well. You need somebody who can trust, who's got experiences that you don't. And I think that's the real difference in between mentoring and coaching, and what we miss a lot of times in education is mentoring is really about differences in experience. So, for example, it's not just implementing that new thing in your class. It's, do I know somebody who recently implemented that thing in their class? What are some things that go wrong? What have they learned from doing that? What experiences can they share with me? Because that's not going to be, that's not something I can read about or watch on YouTube or, research. That's something that I can only learn from connecting with somebody who I trust. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not going to tell them, I'm not going to go to a complete stranger most of the time and say, this is the thing I'm really worried about, or this is the thing I'm really having a hard time with, or even, this is my personal struggle, my personal life struggle that I can't figure out right now, and it's affecting my teaching, or it's affecting my life. You don't go to the person next to you, like, you don't go to the person down the hall who, you borrowed pencils from or something. Like, that's not the person who's, yeah. You go to the person you trust, who has the experiences you need. And when we start in teaching, you don't know anybody most of the time. If you're fortunate enough to know some people in your building, that helps. But you don't know enough to make those connections, to build on them, and have people, having good people that you can go to and say, what do I do with this? Like, I want to go back to school and get a master's degree. What do you think about that? Like, and so the administrator that I had became a great mentor for me when I wanted to get my my administrative degree. She said, well, I can go back and get my doctorate. or I can go get a master's. And she said, why do you want your doctorate? I said, well, I always wanted to have a doctorate. She goes, well, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
She said, what do you want to do with your career? I said, well, at some point I want to be a principal. And she goes, you don't need a doctorate to be a principal.
No.
And if you get one beforehand, you're going to get a whole bunch of debt, and you're going to get you're actually going to be less employable because you're going to cost people more money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, well, when you put it that way, I guess it makes sense to spend less money because I can still get to be the places where I want to be without,
sure,
without spending the extra money and putting myself at some sort of disadvantage. And so she gave me a lot of sound advice because of, her experiences and her having been through all of that before and been through getting her doctorate. And she said, you'll have plenty of time in your life to get that,
mm-hmm.
which was great advice because, it's difficult to find a job as an administrator. It's not the easiest thing. And to have 3 times the amount of, loans to pay off without the income to support it would have been awful.
No. And again, as you're talking there, you said trust. You have to find somebody you trust, and it's relationships. Just like we're tasked to build relationships with the kids, but as a beginning teacher, as a newer teacher, or a newer principal, or a newer
mm-hmm.
or whatever it is, finding that person, that mentor that you can build a relationship and who you trust, like you said, to be able to say like, I don't know what I'm doing type thing, and say that in a way like I feel like I'm just drowning here. I'm not, and say that in a safe environment where, like you said, you don't feel like they're gonna quote unquote rat you out or something like that. And I was just thinking, it's like bedside manner. I mean, I was Karate Kid. I was watching the new Karate Cobra Kai thing on YouTube. Too much language in it. However, I'm not one with all the cussing. I don't like that kind of stuff. But it was entertaining. I will say that. But the example. So if anyone's seen that, you can follow me. But if you haven't, then you can see the original. It's like, think of the 2 masters, the 2 senseis, where you got Mr. Miyagi teaching Daniel with total relationship, total trust, and then you got the mean sensei in the Cobra Kai dojo who is just berating people up and down. The skills you could argue are the same in terms of what the karate knowledge and the karate that they're going to learn, but what would you rather walk away with? I mean, you don't want to be beaten down every single day. Oh, but I'm going to make you better. Is it worth it?
Does it really?
Yeah.
I mean, does it really at the end? Because can you translate that beyond the skills? Because sometimes the skills are just not enough.
No, absolutely not. And I think, you have to have, if you don't have relationships, if you don't have trust, it doesn't matter how strong your pedagogy is. It doesn't matter how strong, because if the kids don't trust you, if the kids don't, they're not going to learn from you. So,
and I think that we focus on, I think there's a big focus on that with kids, especially young teachers now, that they hear that a lot about the relationships with the kids. But one of the things I think that we don't spend enough time talking about is our relationships with one another.
Yeah.
Right. Finding people who help make you better, and surrounding yourself and collecting your good people in your life. And the more good people that you can keep around you. So like, one of the things that you had just mentioned is about finding a mentor and having a person. And I think to myself, I don't have a person. I have lots of people.
Yeah.
I have so many people in my corner that I have, collected over the years and, developed relationships with. And I don't always talk to those people all the time, but you reach out to them and you just check in with them and remind them that you're there and that you're still part of their, part of their circle, someone who they can rely on as well. And all of a sudden, when you find yourself in a situation where their experience is the one you really need, you can benefit from them. And the same goes the other way. When they might find themselves in a situation where they need you, they know that you're going to be a person that they can rely on. And that really does matter. And I think that as we introduce young teachers into the career, and even as teachers grow throughout the profession, one of the things I do talk about in the book is how when you get past that beginning stage of teaching where people start to actually think you know what you're doing, that I think is the dangerous part of life for teachers, because that's when people start to give you opportunities to do stuff.
Yeah.
And in fact, they give you lots of opportunities to do stuff. And sometimes you do. That's when you start to take on way too much, where you haven't really figured out what it is you love or you value, or that you can bring most to your school or your classroom or your profession. And that sometimes I know for me, it happened where I took on too much, and it took away from what I could do in my classroom. I didn't know how to say no. And I didn't know what things I really wanted to be involved in and what things I was just saying yes to because it was nice that people wanted me to do them.
Yeah.
And so having mentors, having people at every stage of your career, no matter where you are. I mean, even as you're going to retire and transition out of the profession, that's a big life change, right? Like, it'd be nice to have some people in your corner who've successfully accomplished that before you walk through those doors and say, what do I do now? Like, that's a big deal. So the idea that we only have one mentor, that we only need a mentor at the beginning of our career, those are things that I hope that people will reevaluate, because the value of those developed relationships, of having people, of being able to call upon the people that you have interacted with and developed relationships throughout your career and throughout your life. That's one of those things that makes you a better person, that makes you better at your job, and also helps you find better balance in your life, right? Because you don't need to do it all. You don't need to do it alone. You don't need to absorb all of it, carry all the burden, do all the things, right? You can find ways to do the things you really love and not do the things you don't really let somebody else do the things that they really love. Right. And so, just reevaluating the notion that once we get through the first year or two, we don't need to have mentors. We don't need to have people, and that it's not just the relationships we build with kids, but with the relationships we build with one another as professionals that really matter. In terms of how we get better and how we can give back to each other.
No, and I agree. I mean, I think for anyone listening, it's like I always try to say, okay, so what's my takeaway from something like this? I think you hit it on the head with technology. It's not just one person. It can be with whether it's Twitter, Voxer, stuff like that. The ability to reach out to somebody, like you said, that maybe doesn't even live in your state, but every month, every other month, every 6 months you reach out to and you glean a nugget from that person. But I'm just thinking, I've talked so much about previously just the power of sharing and what we have. And I wrote down, like, be that person for someone else. If you are in your school site and new teachers are coming on board, think back to when you were your first year and how difficult that is, and just offer it up. Don't feel like, oh geez, but I don't even have it all figured out. Nobody has it all figured out. As soon as you think you have it all figured out, you need to quit, because nobody will ever have it all figured out. But I'm just thinking, encourage anyone listening, if you've got somebody in your building who is new or newer, reach out to them. Hey, can I help you? Bounce ideas. If you've got someone new to a grade level, reach out to them. If you've got somebody, I loved your retirement example. It's like, talk to somebody who's retired, who can help walk you through that, because that's a big life change. And I just think and even if you're not new, 10 years into the profession, 20 years into the profession, like I said, we haven't all figured it out. Be a mentor to each other. So, yeah.
And I think the best thing you can really do is to make yourself available. because you're not going to fit your personality, your teaching style, your who you are as a person is not going to be right for everybody. And that's okay. You don't have to be everybody's mentor. You don't have to be everybody's somebody, right? You don't have to be everybody's person, but they have to be able to know there are people there. And so if you're not available, if you don't make yourself available, if you don't make an attempt to open yourself up to that relationship possibility, they're never going to know, and they won't be able to come to you when they need you. So, it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm going to go in and do this. And, so-and-so is fine. And I don't have anything to give them anyway. You never know what it is they might be looking for, or where they are in their career. They might need you. Exactly.
And it could be something as simple as, how you doing? I mean, seriously, it might be going back to the whole relationship thing, and it might be something as, everything okay? I mean, and just being an ear for them to vent to you about the struggles that they're having, and maybe you don't say anything back. Maybe, because sometimes I've had people do that and they're just like, thanks for listening. Like, I didn't want you to solve my problem. I just needed you to listen. And me saying, like, I've been there. Sometimes
I just needed to say it out loud, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's the best thing is to hear somebody else saying, I've been there. You're not alone. Hang in.
And it gets better.
I'm just going to say, it gets better. You're not the first person to do this. I know that doesn't make you feel better right now, but hang in there. It gets better. So,
yeah, I'm working with a teacher right now who I talk to frequently. He's one of the teachers I work with, and he's at the point in his career where he takes on a lot of stuff for the school, and he makes a really positive difference with people he works with in the school. And he does so many awesome things, but he does so many things. And I'm thinking to myself, it's okay not to do them all. And combine that with the fact that it's been a really difficult year for the teachers in his group, like the pot of kids that they're working with. There's a lot going on there, and he's had one of his most difficult years as a teacher, and just a lot going on. And all I've tried, the worst case scenario out of all that is you develop a friend. Like if you don't develop a good mentor-mentee relationship, and even if the mentor-mentee relationship is past, the worst thing that could happen is you develop a friend, right? So
and sometimes, I've been blessed by that, where the people that I've worked with I call them friends, because on those hard days when work stinks and it's really hard, at least you're thinking, but I'm amongst friends, and that makes
and those days happen. They really do. We don't talk about them enough, but they happen.
They happen. It happened today. So, but that's a story for another episode. So. But hey, Brian, thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
I hope people have gotten something out of this and are just encouraged to. I think I loved how you said that, to put a bow on it. Make yourself available. You don't have to have all the. Just make yourself available. And speaking of making yourself available, if somebody wanted to reach out to connect with you online, how would they do that?
Well, you could reach me on Twitter at btcostello05. On Boxer at BCOSTE403. You can check out my website is costellocorner.com. And that was a beautiful segue. I got to tell you, that was magic right there.
Thank you very much. And your book is called The Teacher's Journey.
Yes, The Teacher's Journey. It's available on Amazon and other places where they sell books. If there are still other places in the world where books are sold, I'm not sure, because I can't remember the last time I bought. There are no good bookstores. Like, I know some places have amazing bookstores. We just don't have those. So I don't know if people buy books in other places unless you have one of those cool bookstores.
That's fine. We have a Barnes & Noble near where I live, but most of our books I purchase through Amazon. So that is the place. Well, Brian, again, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate you sharing.
Absolutely.
And I look forward.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to reading your book and learning more about it. And for everyone listening, thank you. As always, your encouragement helps me want to continue to talk to people and meet people and share their stories. So thank you. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe. iTunes, Google Play, in Spotify now as well. And as always, I know I say it every week, but if you like what you hear, please drop a review. It helps more people locate the podcast so that we can hopefully make a difference in more educators' lives and careers. So once again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, have a good one.